You are now tuned to Global Crossroads Radio, where we explore the pivotal moments and connections in international affairs. Recent diplomatic maneuvers surrounding a potential peace summit in Istanbul have sparked considerable debate and analysis. The anticipated meeting, which ultimately saw key figures absent, has led to questions about strategy, leverage, and the current state of international relations concerning the Ukraine conflict. Initial reports leading up to the proposed Istanbul talks suggested high-level participation. However, it quickly became evident that Russian President Putin would not attend, despite any indications from Ukrainian President Zelensky. This development immediately shifted the focus. Furthermore, predictions from some insiders that the Russian delegation would be led by Foreign Minister Lavrov or even presidential aide Ushakov, a seasoned and formidable negotiator, also proved inaccurate. Instead, the Russian contingent dispatched to Istanbul was notably below the ministerial level. It comprised 2 deputy ministers, a head of a main directorate of the General Staff, a presidential assistant, and 4 military and humanitarian experts. Despite the lower official ranking, the delegation included some significant figures. Notably, Deputy Defense Minister Fomin was present. Fomin is remembered for his March 2022 announcement of a reduction in Russian military activity in northern Ukraine, which preceded the withdrawal of Russian forces from the Kiev and Chernihiv regions, a move then described as a goodwill gesture. His inclusion now could be interpreted in several ways, perhaps even as a symbolic nod to past engagements. Another key member was Major General Zorin, known for accepting the surrender of the Azovstal garrison and his previous negotiation experience in Syria. This delegation was headed by Vladimir Medinsky, the same figure who led Russian negotiators nearly 3 years prior. This choice is seen by some analysts as a deliberate signal from the Kremlin that Russia's core objectives and negotiating stances remain fundamentally unchanged. The composition of the Russian delegation drew immediate criticism from Kiev and its European allies, who decried it as insufficiently senior for meaningful discussions. President Zelensky himself reportedly made disparaging remarks about the delegation's level. However, it's also reported that pre-departure briefings for the Russian team in the Kremlin involved high-ranking officials, including the Ministers of Foreign Affairs and Defense, and military commanders, suggesting Medinsky's team was thoroughly instructed. A significant turn of events came with former U.S. President Donald Trump's decision not to travel to Turkey upon learning of Putin's absence. Zelensky had reportedly anticipated a scenario where, with Putin absent, he could engage directly with Trump, perhaps to highlight perceived disrespect from the Russian side. This did not materialize. Trump's statements effectively upended Zelensky's narrative. Trump asserted that Putin had no reason to attend if he himself wasn't there, and that the Russian delegation's level was therefore not a disappointment to him. This stance directly contradicted criticisms voiced by Zelensky, his team, and allies like Poland, who had initially echoed concerns about the delegation's seniority. Following Trump's remarks, there was even speculation that previous critics might recalibrate their assessment of the Russian team's standing. This sequence of events has led to commentary suggesting that Trump effectively sidelined Zelensky, framing the potential for serious negotiation as a matter between himself and Putin, with Zelensky's role diminished. The question then arose, what was the strategic purpose of Zelensky's presence in Istanbul under these circumstances? The intended display of diplomatic initiative appeared to falter, as there was no obligation for other principal parties to attend at the highest level. Observers have likened the situation to a miscalculated gamble, where an attempt to project strength resulted in an awkward diplomatic position. One American publication bluntly stated that Zelensky had been left looking foolish. While Trump indicated a possibility of arriving later in the week if necessary, his designated representative, Senator Marco Rubio, did arrive and met with the Ukrainian foreign minister. Meanwhile, other U.S. figures like Keith Kellogg were also expected. The broader European and U.S. stance reportedly involved urging Zelensky not to dismiss the opportunity for direct communication with the Russians, regardless of delegation level. Despite initial Ukrainian reluctance attributed to Zelensky's advisor Podolyak, who stated the decision to engage would be the president's, it appears pressure was applied. U.S. envoy Withoff is said to have emphasized that any form of negotiation is preferable to public posturing. Ultimately, the Ukrainian side signaled a technical meeting might occur. The narrative from the Ukrainian side has seen several shifts. Almost a year ago, direct talks were deemed pointless due to Ukraine's unwillingness to compromise on territory and sovereignty. Earlier this year, the rhetoric suggested Putin sought a ceasefire merely for regrouping. Suddenly, just days before the Istanbul events, the discussion shifted to a full and indefinite ceasefire, followed by talks on all other issues, including territorial ones. This perceived inconsistency has drawn criticism, with some terming it not flexibility but a sign of indecision or a reactive stance. While the Ukrainian delegation was en route to Istanbul, Zelensky met with Turkish President Erdogan in Ankara for 3 hours. Following this, Zelensky stated he would decide whether to engage with what he termed Russia's sham delegation, questioning their mandate to make decisions. The Russian Foreign Ministry responded by pointedly questioning Zelensky's own standing to demand talks on equal terms, hinting at unresolved questions about his legitimacy. The use of the term sham by Zelensky also drew fire, with critics pointing to his own background and questioning who was truly posturing. Some Western media, like French state television, even seemed to defend Zelensky against such labels, highlighting a film about him at the Cannes Film Festival. A defense that itself attracted ridicule from commentators critical of what they see as a PR campaign detached from reality. It was widely expected that President Erdogan would encourage Zelensky to engage in negotiations. During their meeting, reports emerged that Ukraine, despite its initial reservations about the Russian delegation's level, would indeed send appropriately ranked officials to talk with the Russians. Ukrainian Defense Minister Umerov was subsequently named. Medinsky, meanwhile, created some anticipation by announcing a statement, which ultimately consisted of brief standard points, after which the Russian delegation departed without taking questions. As events unfolded, CNN and other observers suggested Zelensky might have overplayed his hand. He found himself in a position requiring him to remain in Turkey, ostensibly to demonstrate a serious commitment to peace for Trump's benefit, while simultaneously trying to avoid appearing forced into waiting by the Kremlin. During a press conference, Zelensky emphasized his role as guarantor of the Constitution and Erdogan's support for Ukraine's territorial integrity, including Crimea, though Turkey is a host, not a party to negotiations. He complained about the absence of decision-makers at the talks and expressed frustration that Trump was allegedly pressuring Kyiv more than Moscow. Zelensky claimed Putin proposed direct talks to avoid a ceasefire, a provocation he says he fell for by traveling to Turkey. He also denied making prior proposals to Putin, a claim disputed by sources who assert such offers were indeed made, with Putin initially suggesting direct talks without necessarily committing his own presence. The idea that Zelensky could have talked Putin into a ceasefire if they met face-to-face is now seen as a misjudgment, as ceasefire terms can be, and often are, negotiated at technical levels, even online. Should Russia show no interest in a full ceasefire, Zelensky stated he would request mega sanctions from the US and EU, and also call on the global South to tighten measures. This call for more sanctions has been met with skepticism by some who question their efficacy to date. Ultimately, the situation in Istanbul has been characterized by some as a mismanaged affair for the Ukrainian side. Trump's interventions seem to have further solidified his narrative that any real progress hinges on a future meeting between him and Putin, effectively marginalizing Zelensky in the current peace process calculus. The attempt by Zelensky to project strength and dictate terms appears to have backfired, leaving him in a diplomatically weakened position, according to these analyses. The focus now shifts to whether any substantive discussions will occur, and what, if any, realities on the ground will influence future diplomatic overtures. Like and subscribe to stay tuned. That is all for today.